Seeing everyone's helmet turned towards him was a little disconcerting. Curious about the expressions, Han peeked past the helmets and observed them. Jade's group looked shocked by what just happened, while his group looked amazed. He tried to ignore the expression that Ivy and Ruby were making, though it was bearable in comparison to his mother and sister, especially with how intense their eyes looked. Han was curious about Jackie's group, who aside from Jaehua and Hina, looked to be mildly surprised. Similar to how someone would be startled when expecting a reaction but getting something stronger. Seeing their expressions piqued his interest, though it was likely connected to Lacey making Lulu shut her mouth back in the gym. Seeing them perform so well with hiding their secret made Han want to play dumb even longer, like pretending to be unaware of a surprise birthday party. The person knows something is likely to happen, but not knowing the entire event makes it feel even better when they enter the room just to have their friends wish them a happy birthday. It looks like there aren't any more of those things coming, Han casually said to the group, brushing what had happened aside. Steve stepped forward, waving his arms. No, 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 he kept saying. Pointing at where the creatures had been frozen, he asked, are we just going to not talk about what just happened? Turning towards the rest of the group, he urged them to say something. Going back to Han, Steve asked, how in the world did you do such a thing? Indicating to the gems in Han's weapon, which was still glowing, he continued, where the hell did you get those? Seeming to recover from her own shock, Jade said, Steve, calm down. Han likely picked up those gems from one of the games. It's not like players are required or even encouraged to report the loot that's dropped during the game. She didn't sound like she believed her own words, but likely it was the only thing that made sense. I've never seen the shop sell gems of those sizes, so I agree with Jade. We have bigger problems to deal with instead of wondering where Han got those gems. Lexi chided her brother with her typical sharp words. With Lexi's words, everyone regained their focus, though several people still looked at Han. Kimberly looked like she wanted to say something, but decided against it. I advise we move to another spot, even if we were to continue this conversation, she commented. With the encounter of the creatures, the woods had an oppressive feeling to it. Even though they knew that the forest was dangerous, especially Jade's group, with the trees and the magical feel of everything, they felt more relaxed about the excursion. Just like a child that sees the world as a kind and caring place, all of them was naive towards the things that went bump in the night. Jade's group demonstrated their experience and abilities by correctly assessing their circumstance. Kimberly is correct. Let's move forward before any more uninvited guests arrive. Jade ordered all of them. Aren't we the uninvited guests in this example? Steve commented, a grin in his voice as he tried to lighten up his own mood in addition to everyone else's. This isn't the time, Lexi growled, demonstrating her usual loving contempt for her brother. Han and several of the others in his group chuckled at the siblings' typical comedy act. If one were to first listen to Lexi's words and tone of her voice, people would assume that she hated her brother. But the reason why they were adorable in their banter was that the two of them cared deeply for the other. Lexi only thought of her brother as being too cavalier about life, especially when knowing that Steve could be mature when the scene called for it. The way they interacted with one another made him think of a friend who Han had treated as a sibling. She would be critical of how Han would approach life, knowing that he had a lot of potential and worried for him. Thinking about her made him smile and wondered how she was doing. He could check in on her, but a large part of him just wanted to leave that world behind. With his ability, he could, likely, travel to the point when he was at the restaurant, so maybe in the future. Shaking his head, Han laughed at his reminiscing and wool gathering. What else do you think is out there? Ivy asked her teammates, setting the message to only be heard by them. There was an awkward silence before Grace said, "Judging by what those men guarding the force suggested, I get the feeling that our small encounter was just the tip of what this force is hiding." "Mom, did you feel anything different when you used your skills?" Jennifer asked. The silence spoke volumes when everyone heard Jennifer's words, likely sharing a similar experience in the battle. "I think I know what you mean. When I used that lightning attack, the power felt alive in some strange way, as if the lightning was eager to come out." Their mom answered, "It's due to the substance in the air," Hans said when he sensed everyone was about to jump in and say something similar. In a confused voice, Harmony asked, "What do you mean, something in the air?" "Is it poisonous?" Grace asked in a worried voice. He shook his head to her inquiry. "From the meeting I had with the captain, I found out that this substance is leaking out of the arena and training rooms in large quantities. The stuff in the air must be what allows us to use our skills." "I thought that those rooms were just a simulation," Harmony objected. "If it were a simulation, then we wouldn't have been able to use our skills out here," Ruby said in a quiet voice. Traveling away from where they fought, their mental stress began to pile up. The buildup was contributed by hearing voices calling out for help. This time, everyone was well aware of what was making those cries. No one tried to find out the source of the sounds, more concerned that the voices would be heading over towards them. "Will those things just shut up?" Lulu complained, after hearing another voice off in the distance. "I just want to sleep, but because of those things we can't stop." "Stop complaining," Jackie snapped. "All of us hate the situation we're in, and complaining about it doesn't make it better." "Where will we be stopping to take a break?" Ruby asked Jade. Her and Ivy were beginning to nod their heads as they became tired by the long journey and the constant psychological stress from the monsters. Jade sighed, understanding about everyone's desire to get some rest. "No one had been this deep into the forest, so I had planned on stopping once we lost those creatures." Hearing Jade's words, many of them felt defeated. It felt like they were never going to escape from the creatures. "Jade, I think it might be prudent for us to stop here," Kimberly advised. "Are you sure about that?" Amanda voiced. "What happens if those things return?" Even though she had her usual calm voice, likely derived from her working at an office before things went to hell, Amanda sounded anxious. "Have you guys ever stopped to sleep in these woods?" All of them looked at Jade and her teammates, waiting to hear the answer. They were quiet after hearing Amanda's question, which only added to the strained mood of the group. "We're the first, at least we know of, to go this deep," Steve began to say. "No, this is the first time we'll be doing an overnight, especially in such a dangerous environment." Lexi spoke bluntly at Amanda and the rest of them. Before they could protest, she continued, "But this is something that needs to be done, considering the new normal and the need to be able to survive. What happens if those things, the modified beings, and now potentially new threats that we have found, get through our defenses because we are unprepared?" Amanda appeared to flinch after hearing Lexi's words, her shoulders slumping slightly. Jackie headed over to where she was standing and gently placed a hand on her shoulder to comfort her. Jackie turned to look at Lexi. "What's your plan? Are we going to be resting in shifts and set up a perimeter?" Instead of Lexi answering, Jade stepped in to say, "That's the idea. We'll have 2 teams taking watch. Each team will be composed of half of my team and one of you, who are less experienced in the environment out here. This will both increase the security while allowing the two teams to gain practical experience. Indicating to Kimberly, Jade said, "Kimberly will lead the second team, while I'll lead the first team." Raising a hand, Kimberly said, "Han, your team will be paired with mine. We'll be in the middle of the perimeter with the first team surrounding us, so let's get to sleep." Han and his team moved to where Kimberly was standing. He watched as Kimberly and the two new members sat on the ground with their backs to the other. It was interesting to watch, understanding that each member would provide support to rest while allowing them to focus outward for any attacks. He wondered where they had developed such strategies, though it was likely due to being the ones having to deal with attacks on the campus. With his team being made up of 7 individuals, one of the groupings would have an extra person. Judging by how everyone was already moving to get ready to sleep, Han understood that it was decided upon without his input on the matter. He looked to see his sister and mother looking at him, while Ivy, Ruby, Grace, and Harmony were back to back. His mother patted a spot next to her, indicating for Han to sit down and sleep. Chuckling about how things worked out, he sat on the uneven surface that was nearly covered in glowing roots and some kind of moss. Sitting on the moss wasn't comfortable with the roots underneath it, but it did provide a little bit of padding. The suit itself helped to make things bearable. No one spoke as he leaned against the other, the feeling of fatigue wrapping them like a warm blanket. Han felt the back of his mother and sister, the heat from their bodies, and the familiarity of their presence helping him to drift off. "Han! Han! Wake up!" Jade shook him awake, startling him and leaving him to struggle to comprehend what was happening. Hearing the urgency of her voice, Han felt the feeling of drowsiness fade away and allow him to focus on the situation. "What is it? Is it time for our shift?" Han asked, wondering if it was difficult for her to wake him up. The problem was that her voice didn't sound like this was the issue. "No, we have a problem." Somehow Jiehua and Amanda went missing. Jade's voice was filled with anxiety and confusion.